I've invited a few guests back for a second appearance because their podcast raised so many questions and the information was so good that we just had to have them back. Dr. Allan Bacon was one of those guests as we dove into all things supplements. Our last podcast, we also talked all about how to overcome a plateau. And I don't know about you, but I've been there. So, such great advice with that podcast. But today, we want to do an even deeper dive into supplements. We want to talk about supplements that maybe are geared more toward the menopausal woman, right? Are there some things that we should be taking or could be taking that we are missing out on? Are the things that we're taking that are totally redundant and we don't need to be taking them and they're just a waste of money? Well, this is what I want to ask him today. So I'm so glad that he said yes to be my guest again. So today we're welcoming back to the podcast Dr. Allan Bacon. And I was just saying that he is such a wealth of information. You would be so wise to follow him over on Instagram because I feel like you answer everyone's question. Do you do that?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time. The reason that I got into this was to really help people, and I think that it's something that's really important. And I know that in the social media space, it can be overwhelming for a lot of people to do that, but I try to take as much time as I possibly can to interact with people one-on-one. I think that that can be very important because a lot of the times as coaches or doctors or creators, I feel like we take for granted some of the things that we know.
Hmm.
And by listening to people's direct questions, we can actually answer questions that we didn't even realize was confusing people. And so I find that this is a really beneficial thing to do because it really ends up helping a lot of people overall.
Yeah, I was just talking to one of our trainers, Stratton, about that today too. He said, I think growing up in a healthy family, sometimes we just take things for granted about what
Yeah.
is healthy foods, what are good supplements. And we don't realize that a lot of people have questions about these. And today we are going to answer a lot of those. So let's start by asking you this. So there are a myriad of supplements out there, and every week it seems like something new is coming out, and we see it on our social media feeds, right? People talking about, well, right now there's the buzz about creatine, but there's a lot of supplements, right? And
hmm
so we are of the mindset that we want to optimize our health. And of course, we all want to be doing exactly everything that we need to be doing in order to do that. But with this large onslaught of options, it's challenging. So let me just ask you this first. How do we even begin to determine what a good supplement company would be, a reputable company? What are we looking for, and what are some of the red flags?
So this is a very difficult thing, and it's very difficult because there's obviously no like real regulation in the industry. I mean, there are certain things that you could look for that might give you a little bit of an indication. So things like NSF, safe for sport, those different types of things. If you're a collegiate athlete or underwater rules is probably a good thing to potentially look into. But the best thing that I would say is find professionals that you trust and ask them about the specific supplements to even make sure that what you're getting, what you're going to be looking into is worthwhile for taking anyways. And then identify the proper dosings. That's where you need to start.
Hmm.
Because whether or not a company is reputable, it doesn't matter if what they say is in the product is what's in the product if it's not at the proper dose to actually help you. So first figure that out. Then the best thing that you can possibly do is when you're trying to vet supplement companies, it probably is beneficial if you can contact them and ask for third-party purity testing or third-party verification of what's on their label. And a lot of companies will provide that these days, which is a really, really great thing. So if you're conscious about that, you can make some steps to identify whether or not they're pushing through with the quality assurance on that front. And so I think that that's probably a really good thing to look into. But the first thing when you're identifying supplements from companies is look to see if they've got proprietary blends in their products. And if they have any proprietary blends, it's probably best to move on. And by
Okay, yeah, tell us what that means.
Sure. What a proprietary blend is instead of listing out individually the ingredients on the ingredient label and saying this is how much of this is in here, this is how much of this is in here, what they'll do is they'll put something called a prop blend in place, and it'll be a box or an area on the nutrition label that says this is our energy complex or whatever it is. They can title it whatever they want, and then underneath are a smattering of different ingredients. but they only give you a dosing level for the total amount of whatever that proprietary blend is. So you can't tell what the individual dosings are. And if you see that, it's usually a sign that they're trying to hide underdosing of each individual ingredient, because if they've got one total block that says, hey, this is 6 grams, and then underneath it, it's creatine and beta alanine and taurine and all these things together. And then you realize, well, maybe I should be getting 5 grams of just creatine alone. Am I even hitting that? And then,
Right.
what kind of dosing am I getting in the rest of them? Now, you can get a little bit of an indication based on certain things. Legally in the United States, they're required to list these in order of decreasing amount within that prop blend.
Right.
So the first item that's there will either be the largest item by weight, or it'll be equal to the next item next to it.
Hmm.
And so you can get an idea of relative levels, but you can't get an exact number unless there's some information about one of the pieces in that blend somewhere else. And for instance, you will sometimes see with energy complexes, you'll see a whole bunch of different things in the energy complex, and then caffeine will be somewhere in there. And then on the front of the label, they'll say 150 milligrams of caffeine. And you'll say,
Right.
okay, well, I know that this is 150 milligrams, so everything above it is either equal to 150 milligrams or larger than 150 milligrams. Everything below it to the right of it is either equal to 150 milligrams or less than 150 milligrams. So you can sometimes get some information on it that way, but my main recommendation for these types of situations is just ignore the companies that use prop blends anyways, because the good companies typically won't.
Okay.
And so that's a good that's if you're talking about what is an easy red flag for Gen Pop to look into,
Yeah.
look to see if there are proprietary blends on the label.
Okay.
And in most cases, if there are, particularly if they use them extensively, it's probably something to avoid.
And it will say either prop blend or proprietary blend right there.
It will not say prop blend or proprietary blend. They're allowed to name these blends anything that they want. What you'll see is a specific grouping of
Yeah. Okay.
ingredients. At the top of that grouping, it will have a name for whatever that grouping is, and they can choose whatever they want. But there will be a total weight for all of those items underneath combined, and not an individual weight of each item. So it won't tell you each individual's weight. It
Right.
is a box or a section on the label that will have, hey, all of these ingredients together equal this amount. That's what a proprietary blend looks like on the label. Unfortunately, they're not required to list it as proprietary blend. So they'll typically list it as a complex or something blend, or I mean they can get as creative as they want to make a
Yeah.
marketing ploy to sell this. But you'll typically see something like this is the energy complex, or this is the energy blend, or a variant of that. But if you see that total amount and then multiple items listed underneath it, that is a proprietary blend.
And that's a great reason why we should always be reading the labels as well when we're purchasing things. I know some of our members will take a photo of the labels and then they'll send it or they'll post it in the membership, getting some advice and feedback for that. We're I think there's a lot of protein powders to choose from. I'd like to dive into which ones are the best for what we need them for our targets. And there also is warning labels on some protein powders, right? It seems to be that has to be part of the FDA requirement to say warning labels that they might contain trace levels of lead or cadmium.
Cadmium.
So yeah, how do we, is that okay? Is that going to be normal? Is that across the board where there are these labels? Is that every protein powder or there's some that we should stay away from?
So this is a great question. Let's address that label warning first, and then we'll get into proteins themselves so you can get an idea.
Yeah, that's
Because
great.
that label warning is kind of easy to dismiss, I suppose.
Sure.
Um, Typically, there's going to be trace amounts of lots of stuff in
In
supplements and foods. I mean,
everything.
there's arsenic in fruit. So,
Right.
if we want to talk about like every trace element, like it's not even worth worrying about. The question is this in a high enough amount that it could cause a negative health outcome because the dose is the poison, right? So the issue with supplements, it's not an FDA rule that most people are pointing out when we're talking about this type of thing. It's something called Prop 65, which is a California only rule.
Okay,
And
California. Yeah.
and so you'll see something on the label that'll say this product contains ingredients that have been shown in the state of California to cause cancer or something like that. That's the typical one that you'll see, and that's a Prop 65 warning. The joke among scientists, researchers, and supplement companies is, okay, well, if you don't live in California, don't worry about it. But the reality is this Prop 65 these days, originally it was formulated with a good intention. It has been taken up by people trying to make money off of litigation now, and it basically means nothing. And the way that it works is there's about a list of around 800 ingredients that cycle in and out every year. They change it up, and they change it up a lot of times based off of either no science or based off of who pays the money. And so it doesn't tell you whether or not this product is an actual concern for cancer. It tells you whether or not this product contains something that at any dose has ever been shown to cause cancer. And so using the same definition that the Prop 65 label says, that anything that says this has been known to the state of California to do X, you also have to put this label on coffee, organic fruit, and wood furniture.
Right.
And so it's funny too because there's a couple ways to get this off of your products. You can spend hundreds of thousands of dollars as a supplement company to get safety testing run on it and then send it to the state of California for verification, which nobody's going to do because it's just not worth the money. And it's usually ingredients that people know are safe, or the supplement companies and scientists know are safe in those dosages. Or you have to make a petition and a case to the state of California and typically pay them some money. And that's what coffee did, because this was originally at every Starbucks. They had a sign that said the same thing, and
Oh,
then they were able to get rid of it because they
paid.
paid money. So and so when you see these warning labels, that's not a red flag.
Yeah.
It
Okay.
is just something that has to do. The reason the supplement companies put it on there is because they know if they don't,
Yeah.
anything that is sold in the state of California is then open for litigation.
Sure.
And anybody can sue for anything in civil court. So, because most people don't even look at the back of a label, even though we're talking about that's like what we're talking about today, look at the back of the label and become
Yeah.
more conscious of what you're being sold, you're all of a sudden going to start noticing these warnings. Supplement companies have deemed it this is just the cost of doing business in the state of California,
Mm,
and it's not worth it to pay for it.
mm.
And so that's why you end up seeing that. It doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with that supplement. If you do have concerns about things like an unhealthy amount of heavy metals, that's where you contact the company and say, "Hey, can I get some third-party purity testing?"
Mm.
and get
Okay.
that back. In 99% of cases, there's no problem there. But if you're choosing a reputable company, there's no problem there. But certainly if you are concerned about it, you can contact them and hopefully get some information.
Yeah. Thanks for
Okay.
clearing that up. That's a good explanation.
Protein supplements are confusing for a lot of people because there are a lot of different types. Whey
Yes.
protein concentrate, casein isolate, soy isolate, they basically all work just fine and they are all interchangeable. There are only two protein supplements out there that I would avoid if your goal is to improve lean muscle mass, help with your bones, help with your strength, help with your like longevity, all those different types of things. I would avoid collagen and I would avoid beef protein isolate. Now, you avoid those for the same reason. Beef protein isolate, it sounds like it would be a really good thing. It is blood product and connective tissue. It's the throwaway product from beef production. And supplement companies found that if they took this throwaway product, they ground it up and they sold it as beef protein isolate, people would buy it because they would think beef meat is good. It is not meat. If they were selling you a tub of ground up meat, it would be hundreds of dollars.
Yeah.
People love this product because it is very easy on the stomach, whereas, some dairy products can be problematic for certain people. Beef protein isolate is very easy on the stomach, and it's easy to understand why when you put things in perspective. It's essentially what's in gelatin.
Mm.
And what do they give you when you're in the hospital? Because it's very tolerable.
Mm.
Jello. You can use this for protein in the same way that you would eat Jello for protein. And so when I put it into that perspective, people start
Yeah.
to think, oh, well, that might not be the greatest thing in the
Yeah.
world. Now, collagen is a little bit confusing, and there are certainly gaps in our knowledge there. One, we know it is not great for muscle.
No.
We know it's probably not that great for the immune system, probably not that great for bones. So when I have my clients and we're talking about using collagen and they say, first off, I don't recommend it. I am open to the fact that there could be benefits to it in the future. Right now, it's kind of looking worse and worse and worse for it. But if somebody wants to use it and they're counting something like macros, I would recommend people count it as carbs instead
Oh,
of protein,
Protein.
because
Mhm.
it has the same calories per gram as carbs, but because of the deficiencies in the amino acid profile, it doesn't function like protein. So if we're trying to hit protein minimums or a protein target for the day, it's not a
Mhm.
great thing to use to hit a protein target. Bone broth protein is the same idea.
Mhm.
They're all kind of a connective tissue based protein
Mhm.
product. And what that means is it's very deficient in these amino acids that are very important for lean muscle maintenance, repair, all those different kinds of things, like the branched chain amino acids that we hear so much about, particularly leucine. And so these products are almost entirely glycine and proline. And not to get, too nerdy or into the weeds on this, but it's not going to trigger muscle protein synthesis in the same manner as any of the other proteins that I mentioned before, including things like soy isolate. And so if we're looking to get the benefits of a protein product, it's probably not the thing that we reach for. Now, then the question becomes, well, does it help for skin and does it help for joint benefits? And the answer is we don't know, but it's looking worse and worse. And so when we look at the higher quality study, first off, the skin benefits, mechanistically, it could make sense that it works. And this is why I'm kind of hesitant to really recommend it to people, but the better and better evidence that we get, the worse it seems to work.
Mhm.
So originally, the studies were all done by like the same four guys, and they kept all getting really positive outcomes, which was a little bit suspicious because when it was not those four guys, nobody else could
Mhm.
get these positive outcomes. But they were typically studies that were done, and they were like, okay, well, we're going to give you this collagen supplement, and then we're going to come back in like a couple weeks and say, hey, do you think that your skin looks better? And they would say yes or no. And so it wasn't an objective measure; it was a subjective measure.
Right.
And
Right.
then the idea was, okay, well, if we give people a collagen supplement, and this was typically in like the elderly that weren't eating any sort of protein or any sort of calories. What do we see as far as like their joint comfort goes and all those different types of things? And we started to see some positive outcomes there. And we thought, okay, good. Well, this could be very beneficial, particularly with type 2 undenatured collagen. And this gives us an avenue to explore. So then the joint health benefits started to blow up because companies love this product. They love these connective tissue based proteins because they cost nothing. And so
Mhm.
selling these things is a really, really big benefit for these
Mm.
companies.
Big markup.
Yeah. And then in the past year or two, we started looking at better and better data that looks at connective tissue synthesis when taking these collagen supplements, and we're not seeing it trigger connective tissue synthesis in the way that we thought that it should. So the question becomes, well, if it's actually not increasing connective tissue synthesis, is it actually causing benefits to the joints? Or is it just that people are starting to get some amino acids in their diet when they were so completely deficient? There is a little bit of leucine in those things in these products, but would it be better for these same elderly populations to just have a whey protein? And so we're starting to question whether or not the collagen supplements were really giving the benefits that we thought that they would. Now they're still costing the same amount of calories as some of these other supplements. So my stance at this point is to be a little bit hesitant about the joint and skin health benefits and the hair benefits, those different types of things, and say, hey, probably we should be, focusing on getting more protein in our diets, particularly from whole food when we can. And when we can't, maybe these other options like a whey protein concentrate or isolate or soy are potentially better options because of the more complete amino acid profile.
People certainly are on one side or the other with collagen, and there's so many posts about it all of the time. We get questions in our public Facebook group, and people will post, "Oh, I love my collagen; it's working," and then there's others that think that it doesn't work at all. I
Right.
I took it once for 1 month, and then I'm like, I this feels like a waste of money. I don't know. I probably didn't
So
test it long enough, but also I like what you said the last time you were on is if you are in a calorie deficit and you're trying to optimize the whole foods for the calories that you're allotted for the day, adding on 100 calories of collagen is not going to be the most beneficial thing that you can add to that day. Yeah,
yeah, I
totally.
mean, the studies that look at this, they're looking at like a minimum of like 15 grams of this. And so you're adding in some significant calories when if this is stereotypical, but like if you're a woman, you're probably smaller. Like I'm 230 pounds, so I probably have a little bit more room to move with calories, but
Right.
calories become relatively more important the smaller that you are.
Mhm.
And if you're a 130-pound woman or a 120-pound woman or man, these calories are going to be at a premium. So why be using them in collagen? And so when I was talking about where we look at these
Mhm.
these better or these more negative results. When we start using the deuterated water studies, which are the better quality studies, that's where we're starting to see, okay, well, the connective tissue synthesis is just not playing out like we thought it should be based off of some of the weaker quality studies. So what's going on there? So right now, we're in this stage where we're becoming skeptical of the benefits that this provides because the higher quality studies are not suggesting benefits. The lower quality studies are. And it's possible as research goes on in the future that we could change our mind and we could say, okay, well, this is why those deuterated water studies weren't doing it. Maybe it was a different type of undenatured collagen. Maybe it was in the specific population that these were done in, but we don't know that yet. So, if people start to follow me and then, 8 months down the road, I'm like, hey, collagen might actually work. That's the reason why, because we get new studies and then we
Sure.
change our opinions based off of what we're getting. But
That's
based
right.
off of the breadth of evidence right now, it's probably smart to be skeptical of these benefits, particularly if it's a person that is selling this to you that has a discount code to sell it.
Yes,
So,
and that is
there.
well said. In terms of timing and dosage, Dr. Stuart Phillips actually just posted something this morning on protein timing and how it's, we were so like, I got to get that protein in as soon as I'm done my workout, or I've got to make sure that I fuel my workout before. Thoughts on protein timing, and is it as important as we once thought it was?
So Stu Phillips, I'm going to tell you that I agree with him in this. Stu Phillips and Dr. Lauren, I cannot remember her last name. We're talking about it. This post was specifically targeted at general population, but also at the perimenopausal transition because there's this myth going around right now that there's a difference in protein timing for women or for women specifically in the perimenopausal transition, and it is a myth. There is no evidence suggesting this.
Yeah.
And we have studies in humans, in women, in menopause that show that this doesn't matter. And so the real researchers and the real doctors that are not, what is the term? There are doctor entrepreneurs that are trying to sell the idea that this matters. And then they want you to, listen to their podcasts and get their book and all those different types of things. The the objective doctors and researchers are looking at this going, we don't have data that shows this. In fact, we actually have studies looking at perimenopausal women that this is not a thing. And so we're all very confused as to why this claim is coming out. And typically the answer that is given is, oh, well, we're going to look at nitrogen excretion data from the 1980s in women, and then we're going to make leaps as to what happens in the real world. Whereas the rest of us are like, well, we have data in the real world that shows that this isn't true. So if you've got a mechanistic claim and it doesn't play out in real life, then something is wrong in between the beginning step that you're saying and then the outcome. So the outcomes are not showing this. And that's what Dr. Lauren and Stu were pointing out in these studies is that these people are making claims, but they're making claims not based on studies that have shown this to happen. They're making claims based off of how certain mechanisms in your body work, but then they're not following that through to the outcome. And so that's where the confusion comes into play. And it's typically because it's a very reductionist take on how the body works because there are compensatory mechanisms. There are other things in play. Like if you're strength training, things are different than if you're not strength training. And for people that are listening to this podcast, you
Yeah.
probably exercise. And so you're not going to have the same reactions to things as somebody that just sits on their couch at home.
Right.
And that's what a lot of these doctor entrepreneurs are missing is that um, they are not really understanding what happens in populations that exercise, but
Hmm.
they're extrapolating it to populations that exercise. So when we
Right.
talk about this thing called the anabolic window, the idea originally was that within 30 minutes of you exercising, particularly weight training, you needed a protein dose to maximize protein synthesis to get the full benefits of the anabolic response, build lean muscle, all the benefits that we want from building any kind of lean muscle, right? They started doing more and more research into this. And the current consensus goes along with what Stu Phillips was saying, is that it's more likely an anabolic barn door than it is an anabolic window. So timing probably does have a little bit of an effect. However, total daily intakes are far more important than anything else.
Right.
Women and men are not different.
Yeah.
The perimenopausal transition does not change this. We have, like I said, data looking directly at this, and it doesn't happen. When we talk about it as being a barn door, what's really interesting about this is number one, I would focus on your total daily intakes.
Yeah.
So if you're not getting in your total daily protein intake, don't worry about any of the next stuff that I'm going to be saying. Protein
Yeah.
timing is not for you. Focus on how you can best get in your totals, no matter how you can get them in. If you have no problem getting in your totals on the day and you say, "Hey, Alan, I want to take advantage of protein timing as best as I possibly can. What are the little tips and tricks?" Now, there are a few,
Yeah.
but again, they pale in comparison to totals. So when we talk about it as being an anabolic barn door, there have been studies that have looked at the 3 hour pre and 3 hour post period. So this 6 hour period that goes over the workout itself, the weight training itself. What we find is if you're eating a protein dose that is sufficient within a few hours leading up to training, you probably have multiple hours afterwards that you don't need to get anything in, and you'll still maximize all of your responses. If you are not, if you're training fasted, like say that you get up in the morning and you just go and work out and you haven't had anything to eat, it might make more sense to get a protein feeding sooner afterwards because you've been in a state of not having nutrients in your body and you may have a lesser circulating pool of amino acids. But these are those last percentage points. This
That's
isn't
right.
like, and I really want to point that out because
Yeah.
you might hear from people like Stu or from Alan Aragon or some of these other guys that I think are very, very intelligent on these things. And they may say, "Hey, don't worry about that. Just get your total dailies in." I'm not disagreeing. I
Yeah.
am, and a lot of times we'll say this because we want the message to this is the most important message and we want that to be the take home. However, based on the current level of data that we have, and I know that is on board with this as well because we talk about this extensively, this 6 hour or so peri-workout period, if you can get everything else in, probably does make a little bit of sense to be conscious of intakes. But that's only if you don't find this overbearing, if it's not, an emotional burden for you. And if that's the case, that's perfectly fine. If you want to bring a protein powder in a blender bottle to your gym and take it down like immediately after, there is
Do
no
it.
negative. Yeah,
Do
there's
it.
nothing
Yeah.
wrong with this. And that's why these medical entrepreneurs, nobody when people follow their plans, they'll say, "Well, this isn't hurting me." And there are some things that they say that do make your progress less, but this is one of those things that's a wash anyways, because if we know that the total daily amounts matter most, if
Right.
you're forcing yourself to get something in within 30 minutes, that's still part of your total daily amounts, right? But what I want to point out here, and I think that what Tracy wanted to point out with this question is the fact that this should not be adding stress to your life because
Yeah.
it's really not that important.
Yeah.
And so if your life was being unhinged because you had heard from, Dr. X that you had to have this amount of protein right after you're going to go catabolic. I mean, the other thing that kind of goes along with this is one of the doctors is telling women that they have to eat every 2 to 3 hours or they're going to go catabolic. That is absolutely batshit crazy because you would never be able to go to sleep.
Yeah.
So it's a really funny thing that's being pushed around. And again, none of it is based on real world data. It's all based on mechanistic claims. And I think that what we're doing is we are one taking agency away from women in particular because men don't seem to be worrying about this that much anymore. We're taking away from the agency of women in particular, and we're overcomplicating something in an effort to look smart. And I don't think that that benefits people.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. I think making the differentiation of who the audience is. You know what I mean? Like for my audience, we are women who want to optimize health. So
Mhm.
you some of the audience I think are athletes and so you're going to have slightly different protocols. But I love what you said that overall, your protein intake matters. If you have the ability to have a feeding around your workout, pre or post, do that, but
Yeah.
don't stress about it. So
Yeah.
I love the common sense about that. And I think that's really good advice. Let's move into BCAAs, branch chain amino acids versus essential amino acids. A lot of people often ask me, should we be taking that as well? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on BCAAs and EAAs.
So the answer is no, you don't really need to take these. They're not really going to provide any benefit for you. And again, this was one of those supplement company things that they love to do because they were originally sourced out of like human hair from China or duck feathers.
Oh, really?
And yeah, that's where they got them. Yeah. And then there was the Ajinomoto came out and they're like, well, you don't need to have those gross human hair samples anymore. You can get our nice plant-based aminos. But it was like sludge runoff of like rotting vegetables. And then they
Oh,
just broke it down into amino acids. So they're all kind of gross. And it was funny that one was being sold as like being a lot better than the others, and it was rotten vegetables. But
mm,
there are a variety of different issues that we can have with BCAAs. And what it really boils down to is that if you even get as little as like 1.1 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight per day, you don't really see any benefits from these things.
right.
And this is a very, very large point of confusion for people because you can look up systemic reviews, and systemic reviews, even from very reputable places like the ISSN, will say like, yes, they do improve recovery. And that's true. It's just unnuanced. And so the information that we'll get into here will help a little bit with being able to understand this and realizing, hey, maybe I can probably save some money there too.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it's funny that I'm coming on here and we're talking about supplements and I'm just telling people don't take this, don't take this, don't take this. But what we're really trying to do is we're trying to make sure that you're
Well,
taking
save
the
you
right
money.
things. Yeah,
Yeah,
and save you money. Like I don't want people to be taking stuff just to take stuff.
for sure.
And so we have a variety of different issues with branched chain amino acids in particular. I mean, there could be competitive absorption issues where when you're taking branched chain amino acids, that's only three amino acids, and that's part of the complete EAA complement. And so if you're taking a very large amount of just those three, you can potentially have competitive absorption issues where it's blocking the absorption of the full complement that's needed to do all the processes that your body needs. Because
Okay.
your body's going to pull across things based off of where it is, and sometimes it's just pulling across too much valine, too much, leucine or whatever it is, and it's running short on some of the other ones. Essential amino acids get around that issue, but the real thing is when you compare an amino acid equated protein source, whole protein source, like a whey protein or a meal, to an amino acid equated BCAA or EAA in particular, because you're going to need that full complement, we see more benefits with the whole protein
Yeah.
than with the EAA product in body composition, in the way that strength performs, all of these different things. There's something about the actual structure of the whole protein that gives benefits. Maybe it's the slower digestion speed, which gives your body more time to be able to absorb things. I mean, slower digestion speed is technically better for the large majority of applications um, because it can keep anabolism high longer. It can allow you to utilize more of that protein. So we see benefits from these things in whole protein sources, including the protein powders, better than these amino acid products, anyways. So, my question for most people would be if you're in a situation where you can drink an amino acid product, why wouldn't you just have a protein shake? If you
Mm,
if you really want to do things right.
mhm,
And people will typically respond with, well, I train fasted in the morning and I want to prevent, muscle loss. And so I take my BCAA product. But
mm,
there was a study from Wolf in 2017, Wolf and colleagues, and they looked at that and they actually saw that it increased muscle loss taking a BCAA product fasted.
mm.
And so maybe this is not the right product to be taking in these instances. Now, EAA product would probably be a little bit better, but better than this would be a whey protein product or something else. And
Yeah.
so then it comes down to, okay, well, it doesn't improve body composition, it doesn't improve performance, it doesn't improve all these other things, but we do see these benefits to recovery. So what's going on there? When we look at BCAA supplements on a label or amino acid supplements in general on a label, it will tell you 0 calories, but they don't have 0 calories. They have about the same calories per gram as your common table sugar. It's like 4.65. And people are very confused by that because they're like, well, how is it legal to put zero if it's actually 4.65 per gram? So I'm typically getting like 25 to 50 calories or maybe even more in these products. Free-form amino acids are not legally required to list their calorie amount, flat out. When we look at the research that suggests that BCAAs provide recovery benefits, if you control for the calorie amount, BCAAs either do nothing or only do a benefit to the equivalent of their calories. So you could literally just be taking sugar and it would give you the same recovery benefit. And it helps to understand that there are calories in play there. And this is why when you do a systemic review of it, yeah, you can show studies that show this, but it only shows a recovery benefit when you're comparing it to something that has no calories. So if they're comparing it to like sucralose, all of a sudden the BCAAs look like they have a recovery benefit. And so you will see that in the research. So the question becomes, okay, I'm taking this product because I want it to either increase my performance, I want it to increase my recovery, or I want it to stave off like a catabolic response. I want it to prevent muscle loss. Well, sugar does all those things. It does it better than BCAAs. It costs less. It probably tastes better, and it's cheaper.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, in every instance that you can typically recommend using an amino acid product, a Gatorade would do better.
Right.
And
Right.
you can get the powdered version of Gatorade from,
Yeah.
Amazon for very, very cheap. And so when we talk about this in the end, people are like, well, there's got to be something. And yes, there are certain instances where an amino acid product, and if you're going to choose this, you're going to get an EAA product at always, never get the BCAA. There are certain instances where you could make an argument for it. If you're vegan and getting really low protein, you should probably just get leucine. But if you're vegan and you're getting an adequate amount of protein in the day, it doesn't really matter anyways. If you are doing something like a CrossFit competition, a strongman competition, a triathlon, you're doing a very extended amount of endurance activity or a single day multi-event situation like a CrossFit competition or strongman, and you are unable to get a meal in between your events or you just don't want to, an EAA product can be beneficial there. However, the carbs are going to be more important. So you need to get the carbs down. You need to have that Gatorade or something like that first. And then if you want some EAAs on top of that, you can certainly add that in.
Mhm.
That's about the only time that it really makes sense to have one of these things, or if you just have too much money and you need to get rid of some. So we've
Said no one ever.
Right. So we've got these situations where
Yeah.
like these amino acid products are just people love them because or companies love them because they sell a lot and they're super cheap and
Sure.
they're
Yeah.
sourced really easily and they taste pretty good. It's the same kind of things that the beef protein isolate gets into. It's like they're easy on the stomach, they taste great. They're high margins for the companies. But if we're going to talk about recovery where these things probably shine, then the carbohydrates, the fast carbs are much better. And you can start to plan fast carbs in a different way. If you are working out extensively for an hour or longer, and I'm not saying that you're going into the gym and you're, doing a standard physique routine where you've got those interset rest periods. I'm saying like you're doing like an hour long CrossFit WOD where you're going constantly. That might be the time where you start to consider, okay, well, maybe a supplement in the middle of my workout could be beneficial.
Mhm.
And so that's where we start to do um, if you're working out for really extended periods of time, if you're doing a bodybuilding style workout and it's 2 hours or longer, that's where you can do this too. 30 to 60 grams of glucose per hour tends to work really well in those situations. Now we're limited by how much we can absorb the glucose itself. Our body can only absorb a certain amount at one time. So that's why there's a number there associated with it. If you're greater than 2.5 hours of exercise, you can do 60 to 70 grams of glucose, and that's pretty safe for the GI. You can technically absorb up to 90 grams per hour in that situation, but it's probably going to mess your stomach up a bit. But if you're really working out for extended periods of time, like 2 hours or longer, 2.5 hours or longer, and you want the most benefits from these things, and I'm thinking, you marathon runners, you triathletes, all those types of people, and you might have some in your
Mhm.
listener group right now. 80 to 100 grams per hour is where you should be sitting, and you should do a 2-to-1 ratio of glucose to fructose or glucose to sucrose. They are absorbed with different pathways, which means you can absorb a little bit more, and you can also fight off that GI distress that you would get otherwise.
Speaking of GI distress, let's move into a conversation about creatine monohydrate
Sure.
and creatine HCI hydrochloride. I just posted something on creatine today or yesterday, and this was someone asked this question. They found that the HCI gave them way less gut distress, right? Less bloating. And so, what are the difference between the two? I know that the creatine monohydrate is the gold standard, but is there a people group that would benefit from taking the hydrochloride instead?
We don't see any benefits to the hydrochloride in the research outside of solubility. Now, solubility doesn't mean that it absorbs better. It means that it mixes better in a glass. So if you're very worried about how it mixes in a glass, you get creatine hydrochloride, you get the creatine HCl. If you want a good price per serving, if you want something that's going to work optimally, if you want the most extensively studied, you get a micronized creatine monohydrate. Now,
Mm.
what we will often see is a variety of different claims around how creatine hydrochloride is better tolerated by the GI tract. It's never been shown in research. And this claim typically goes around, and this might be the reason that this person asked this question. So I'm gonna point this out, and then that person, if they're listening to this, can double check because this is usually the error.
Mm.
So supplement companies that sell creatine hydrochloride sell it at an extremely high price. I mean, creatine monohydrate is very cheap. And so what they do is they make a lot of money selling it at an extremely high price. On the label, companies are not required by anybody to put proper dosing on labels. Nobody checks it. They give you a recommended dose, but it's literally the guy who made that's recommended dose. It's not
Right.
scientifically validated. And so what creatine hydrochloride will typically do is they will make the claim that they don't cause any bloating, that they don't cause any GI distress. Retaining intramuscular water weight is a feature of creatine monohydrate. It is not a bug. It is actually one of the reasons that you have reduction of cramps. It's one of the reasons that you have heat tolerance. It actually fights dehydration. And this is intramuscular water weight. So what ends up happening is it goes into the muscle. It doesn't sit on top of the muscle. So don't think bloating, think peach booty. It actually makes the muscle look more full in a
Mm.
way that gives you the shape that you want. So this is not a bad thing. Now, creatine hydrochloride, what they do as manufacturers to kind of manufacture this anecdotal, it gives me less GI distress, is they will tell you to only take 1.5 or 2 grams of the product. Now, 1.5 or 2 grams of the product likely isn't giving you any benefits. So
Right.
because it's not working, you are not feeling any bloating. Whereas
Right.
maybe that intramuscular water weight you were misunderstanding as bloating. There has never been a study that suggests you can take less creatine hydrochloride ever, ever. But
That's
the
such a good
manufac
point.
yeah, but the
Yeah.
manufacturers will often put a
Yeah.
very, very low dose on there. It makes it look like they've got more servings,
Right.
and it kind of tricks you into thinking that it doesn't cause GI distress.
Right.
Whereas if you were
Wow.
taking the same amount as you should be
Right.
to actually get benefits, you're going to start feeling what you thought that you were feeling. Or maybe it's just one of those expectation effects. I was
Yeah.
told that this causes less GI distress, therefore I
Yeah.
feel less GI distress.
Yeah.
So we don't see any benefits to creatine hydrochloride in any metric outside of the solubility in a glass. It does mix really well in a glass. It tastes a little bit more sour
Yeah.
because of the acidity to it, but that's about it. So
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
if you tell me
Hmm.
that I don't like taking creatine monohydrate because it's giving me GI distress, well, then I've got a couple things that you can look into.
Yes.
One, make sure that you're getting micronized. Two, particularly as women who we've talked about before are just on average smaller, maybe you start out at 3 grams per
Hmm.
day instead of doing the standard men's 5 grams. Now, yes, even for women, there can be more benefits to some of the higher dosaging, but especially if you're in your first month, let's not go nuts with that.
Sure.
Let's not do a loading phase. There's talk about the loading phase, and I don't even recommend that for men. That's where men take 20 grams at one time for an entire week, and gets them to saturation faster. Yes, it's true, it does happen, but it really wreaks havoc on the stomach for a lot of people, and it's just not necessary because the benefits of creatine are developed over time. Those increases to performance, that one rep here, one rep there, you get to muscle saturation in about 3 weeks, anyways, just taking the normal 3 to 5 grams per day. So, what are those extra 3 reps going to do for you? I mean, they're not going to build any appreciable muscle compared to what it was before, but if you realize that there's no reason to cycle on and off creatine, if you're just going to go on and just stay on for the rest of your life, then what are these extra 3 weeks? What's the problem there? And if
Right.
GI distress is the concern, just don't do it. Just take the 3 grams and move on with life.
Yeah.
And so you'll get all the same benefits at the end and not the GI distress. Now, there are certain benefits that are recommended for creatine, like the bone health benefits, the brain health benefits that may require some
Higher.
higher dosages.
Sure.
And I don't have an exact reason why, but what we see when we look at the research is that if you look at like the 3 to 5 gram dosage range, particularly for things like the brain and the bone health benefits, we don't see a consistent result. But if you look at like 7 to 10 grams, all of a sudden results start to seem better and we start to seem more consistent. And so maybe what's happening is that muscle saturation happens first, and then maybe it tends to carry over to brain and bone health benefits. So there's a possibility that higher dosages may help with those things if that's something that you're particularly interested in. And for this demographic that we're talking to here, I actually think that no matter whether you lift weights or not, everybody that's 18 to 89 should be taking this if you don't have a reason to not take it. So if you've got damaged kidneys, a damaged liver, asthma, or an autoimmune disease, maybe you shouldn't be taking this. It doesn't cause kidney or liver damage, but if your kidney's not functioning properly, it's not filtering properly, and you should even lower your protein amounts when that's the case. So this is just an amino acid thing in general. But if you're not in those cases, you should be taking this whether you exercise or not. I mean, the brain health benefits, your 90-year-old grandmother should be taking this.
My parents are both taking it.
They should be.
But
I mean, and
yeah.
it's a great thing. And so, some people will point out, well, in some of these things like the brain benefits and the bone benefits that I've talked about, the research is a little bit inconsistent. It's like, yes, but there's also no downsides, and there are a lot of potential benefits, and it costs nothing.
Yeah, it's
So
cheap.
all of these people should be taking it. If you have issues with GI distress, make sure that you get that micronized. You can also split your dosing. So if you're going to do 3 grams per day, do 1.5 twice per day. Do it
Mhm.
in warm water. You can even put it in your coffee if you want to. I mean, it's a
Mhm.
little bit gritty, but you can do it. And as long as creatine itself is not extremely liquid stable, but it's not going to like degrade if you put it in and then just drink it,
Yeah,
and so the concern is we can't sell products that are ready-made drinks with it in it, because if it's sitting there for weeks and months, the creatine is going to dissolve away and not be
right.
viable by the time you get it. But if you're just putting it into a liquid immediately, you've got a lot of time.
Yeah.
You've got that day is going to be fine. So you can do it that way. But, people start to look at this and they'll say, oh, well, I have these issues with it. And it's like, okay, well, we've got a couple things that you can do to make this more tolerable for you. And particularly if you're a woman, you're going to say, okay, well, maybe I want to try that 7 to 10 grams because it could be beneficial for brain and bone health. And particularly in people in the perimenopause transition, we don't see massive differences in muscle loss or fat gain. I know that this is a controversial topic, but overall in the absolute values, we don't see major differences in those things according to the research. But one of the things that we do see is more proclivity for osteoporosis. Certainly, we see more potential for central adiposity, central fat gain. But that osteoporosis, if we're going through a period of time where we might be more susceptible to osteoporosis, through the perimenopause transition and maybe after, why don't we take some of these supplements that could potentially help in conjunction with the weightlifting that we should be doing? And so I think that creatine is particularly beneficial during this transition because of some of the challenges that women face during the transition. And yeah, I would advocate that everybody should do it. But keep in mind that when you're dosing properly, you're probably going to gain 3 to 5 pounds, and
Yes,
that's
and don't
okay.
panic about it. It's not
Mhm.
fat. It's
No, it's
just
not.
water into the muscles. And
It's
it
that
will
peach.
probably subside within a
It,
month.
it's that peach
People
booty that
people
you're going
freak
for.
out. Yeah, exactly. They freak
Well,
out about that part and don't want to take. I had this post I just did. So many women were like, oh, I don't want to gain weight, so I'm not going to take it. I'm like, no, it's not fat. You're not gaining fat unless your diet has shifted substantially. It's just this water.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
and I would tell people to expect that weight stays, because remember that water, it's going to continue pulling water intramuscularly, but
yeah,
it's not bloat.
right,
And a lot of people will say, well, I gained 3 pounds, therefore I'm bloated. You're not bloated. That's again, this is a feature. It's not a bug.
right.
But people need to understand that this is going to happen, because if you understand that this is going to happen, then it's not scary.
Yeah,
And particularly if you're just now getting into weight training, if you're just now starting to eat protein, because, red meat has a certain amount of creatine in it, and maybe you've got very low creatine stores naturally. So if you're making all these changes at once, and all of a sudden you're taking 5 grams of creatine, and your creatine store, your skeletal muscle creatine stores went from nothing to full immediately. I mean, you could gain 5 pounds or six
sure,
pounds very, very
right.
quickly. And it's like, oh my God, this is terrible for me. And it's like, no, your body's actually getting healthier and where you want it to be. I mean, this is the type of stuff that will really help you.
Yeah, it's doing what you paid for it to do.
Mhm.
I'm going to
Yeah.
ask one more question, but for anyone that has a question right now who's watching live and you want to drop it in the chat, feel free to do that right now, and we'll get to your questions in just a moment here. But to finish off with, And then I've got some other questions that people have written into the membership, and we'll ask those as well. But are
Sure.
there any legitimate fat burning supplements? I've never taken them. I don't advocate them, but I think a lot of people want to take them. I know when you compete in, figure competition, bikini competition, oftentimes people will take them during that phase. Thoughts on that and anything that you recommend or don't?
I mean, legally, no. There used to, there used there used to
Perfect.
be in the 90s, there used to be, I mean, there used to be ephedrine used to work really well, and then they
Yeah.
decided to cut that out. And it was actually cut out. It's almost like a mistake because like you can literally buy it in Canada all you want, and nobody's like dying up there. The problem was they had people just like with like caffeine. If you
Yeah.
take strong stimulants and then like dehydrate yourself and then try to like go run and work out in football pads in the Georgia heat in the summer, it can mess with you. And
Yeah.
so it kind of got hit by that and some other things.
I think
But as
people want to
far
do it the fast way, but it's not fast. We shouldn't be doing it the fast way.
Well, the faster that you do it, the more of a chance you're going to lose lean muscle, which is problematic because, that's literally one of the best things for longevity and quality of life as you get older. You don't want to just get older. You want to get older and be able to go on
Mhm.
hikes, pick up your grandkids, hang around with friends, go swimming, all these different types of things. And you're not going to do that if you're constantly chasing I just need to lose weight on the scale. I mean, that's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to fitness. And it's probably this is going to be funny, but I think that it's probably men that are to blame for this. And men are to blame for this because, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the thing that we were always pushing was the feminine ideal was to be skinny. And I think that the great thing about the past 20 years, and actually one of the benefits that I see from CrossFit is that it's actually shown, women that being strong is an aesthetic thing. It's great. It's wonderful. And men are starting to change their minds about, hey, we love athletic women. This is really great. So we're finally on your side with this after causing this whole problem. But the big issue that I see with women, particularly 30 and older, is that the buy-in for building this muscle and being athletic is there. These women they're like, yes, that's what I want. The problem is, subconsciously, you have been drilled for so long, so many decades, that the way to get there is to lose scale weight. That even though you've bought in to that athletic physique, you're not getting there in the right way. And this
Right.
may not be you specifically, but this is Gen Pop. Still
Hmm.
thinks, yes, I want to have that lean toned athletic physique, but I don't want to take creatine. I don't want to see the scale rise. I don't want to lift heavy. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. And it's like, but that's how you get to where you say you want to be. And people will constantly say, I just need to see the scale going down because that's my sign of success. That's the 80s and 90s mentality. That is not
Sure.
today's mentality because you're probably going to look more athletic at a slightly higher body weight than what you think that your original goal is. And that's okay. Let's get you healthier. Let's get you, you know, more injury resistant. Let's get you stronger. Let's get you more capable. And I like to call this Operation Wonder Woman instead of Operation Crack Model, which is unfortunately what all these people are trying to work towards to get to this ultimate health. Even though we've got that mental buy-in of I like this body style and I like this look and I like the benefits of health that come here, a lot of times we're kind of our own worst enemies in the path to get there, and it's not your fault. It's you've been conditioned by society. And I bring this up not to blame anybody or put the onus on you, to make you aware of the feelings that we have and why they may be there. And if it's brought up, people can say, oh, maybe that's the thing that I need to get that buy-in to. Maybe I just don't want to starve myself anymore. Maybe I start to focus on building some lean muscle and valuing performance and valuing, all of these things that will get me to where I want to be. And maybe the path to get there is just different than I originally thought.
Yes, we talked about this on the podcast the other day with Dr. Crystal Guevara, and it was more on that focus of being strong. And I think a lot of our audience, I know a lot of our members and people who participate in our programs, that is the focus. We're like, okay,
Good.
enough about being lean, like skinny, even though there are some people who are naturally skinny and are trying to add weight and muscle. And, that both, it's challenging both ways, but
Mhm.
really having this mindset on how can I make this body that I'm in strong and optimize for health. And that's definitely our target here. All right, let's jump into some questions. Again, if you have a question, you want to drop it in the chat, let us know. But Jen asks this: can you ask Dr. Allan about probiotics? I don't believe I eat a lot of food with probiotics. Therefore, I do take half a dose every evening before bed. So 25 billion CFU. If I have to go on an antibiotic, I take the full dose, but just for maintenance. I take one capsule per evening, and should that be done on a daily basis? Or I've heard sometimes you should take a break.
I don't have any recommendations for probiotics for otherwise healthy people. And the reason that I don't is because even if you talk with gastroenterologists about this, we don't know what dosage, what strain, for what person, under what conditions, when will these be beneficial. We've got a couple ideas that work really well. If you are on antibiotics, particularly for extended periods of time or a strong run, I like the idea of taking probiotics because it can help. It's been very reliable in reducing like antibiotic related diarrhea and stuff like
Yeah.
that,
Hmm.
and in repopulating the gut because the antibiotic is going to be a systemic thing, right? And so it's going to kill microorganisms, whether they're good or bad, throughout your body. So repopulating when you've been down is probably a good thing. For an
Hmm.
otherwise healthy person, we don't see reliable results for anybody.
Hmm.
Um, and so, the real answer is you eat a more varied diet because your microbiome is going to change based on your diet. But the microbiome seems to, in most cases, be secondary to health rather than the cause of health. And a great example of that is fecal transplants. The number one way to change a gut microbiome, and you can change it almost immediately, is to do a fecal transplant. What they do is they take a microbiome. They essentially take feces from
Yeah.
a healthy person, and then
Hmm.
they
Transplant.
retroactively put it up into a person and change their gut microbiome. And so they've done studies and they've looked at, hey, if we take a really healthy, thin, athletic person and we give this to like an obese person that's
Hmm.
got all these health problems, it does not change their health outcomes. It doesn't change their, the obesity issues. It doesn't change any of the blood levels or anything like that. Even if we can get verification that the microbiome has completely changed, it doesn't change the health. So when we talk about these things, this is a roundabout way to say, hey, focus on, eat as best as you possibly can, healthy lean meats, even lean red meat's perfectly fine as long as you're getting in fruits and veggies, healthy dairy if you can tolerate it, healthy grains, healthy fats, all these different types of things, and exercise and sleep well, and your microbiome will work itself out.
Yeah.
So when people ask me, well, what should I do about probiotics? And I'm an otherwise healthy person, I can't give a recommendation because we don't see reliable results from taking them unless you have certain issues, and antibiotics are one of those that we do see benefits from.
Yeah, I would totally concur. That's exactly when I would take them. I have not spent or wasted my money on those. In fact, for probiotics, I have sauerkraut almost every day, so really
That's
getting
great.
those fermented foods, right? Sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, and then for prebiotics, focusing on getting that adequate amount of fiber, which most of our North America does not get. So,
And please,
right?
not to cut you off there, but
Yeah,
please, please, please get your fiber from food,
yeah,
not a fiber supplement. And the reason being, it's not that the fiber is any more or less beneficial. It's that having adequate fiber in your diet from high fiber foods is a proxy for a varied micronutrient intake. So health tends to be a lot better when you're getting it from foods because all of those other things from foods are
right.
coming into your body at the same time. And the reality of nutrition is, and I'm a big nutrition guy, is that we don't know a whole lot about nutrition. We like to think that we do, but we don't. We cannot create a multivitamin that has like the right interplay of nutrients to make you fully healthy. We don't know all of the beneficial constituents. We're still learning all this stuff about food. And so getting it from food is the number one thing, no matter what the question is when we're talking about nutrition and health.
Yeah. Okay, another question here. Sue says, I'm taking vitamin D3 for bone health, but was told to avoid calcium supplements as excess can be harmful to the heart. I do get my full intake of calcium via foods, but wondering if excess can still arise from nutrition.
I'm not worried about that from nutrition. No.
Yeah.
The issue with supplementation is that it tends to be highly concentrated and a lot in some cases, depending on what you're taking, right? So no, and people will have the same question about things like, well, um, you know, um, anti-inflammatories and stuff like that from fruits, and it's like, no, you don't really need to worry about that. It's not an ultra concentrated dose of that type of thing. So from supplementation, yeah, sometimes you have to worry about these things from foods. Don't worry about it at all. This is not, you're not going to cause any harm from foods.
Yeah. Good. She
Sure.
says, I am interested in magnesium. Can you ask Dr. Allan about magnesium threonate? Is it safe to take? And is it better than magnesium glycinate for sleep? Probably not, but what do you have to say
I,
about the glycinates?
so magnesium for sleep, I believe that it does work. We're actually just now getting some studies that are supporting that. Believe it or not, the benefits for sleep for magnesium have been largely anecdotal until like literally the last few months. Um, I don't think that there is any reason to necessarily choose one form over the other for magnesium replacement or necessarily sleep outside of just don't pick magnesium oxide. Pick any chelated form of magnesium
Mhm.
and you're going to do just fine. It's going to give you the magnesium replacement benefits. The reason that you don't pick magnesium oxide is it will give you diarrhea if you're taking too much of it or if you have a
Yeah,
sensitivity.
right.
So it's one of those things that a lot of people will say, okay, well, magnesium is really good for me, therefore I'm going to take this. But the difference between something like a glycinate and a threonate, I mean, threonate they tends to make claims that it crosses the blood-brain barrier a little bit better, that it might have some cognitive benefits. We don't really know if it's going to be massively different from a practical outcome standpoint. So when you're looking for the benefits from these things, I would say get the one that is from the company that you trust the most, that has the best price.
Yeah, good. Great advice. Well, thank you everyone for listening. Thank you to Dr. Allan for being our guest today. That was so informative as per usual. And I would love people to follow you because this is literally what he does on his Instagram page. And just share your handle again with us.
Sure. Check out Instagram at Dr. Allan Bacon, Allan. Or if it's easier for you, go to MauiAthletics.com. Maui Athletics is my nutrition coaching company, but the links to my social media are down at the bottom. So you can just click on that if you're concerned about typing the right name.
And we will add all of those links to the show notes below as well, so you can follow him and or work with him. Well, thanks everyone for joining. As always, go move daily in your fitness, wellness, and nutrition. And we'll see you all in the next Move Daily Talks.